Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show, and I am glad that all of you can be here with me in this escapade. And by escapade, I mean doing the news. When real men can't sleep, real men do the news. And I know that doesn't necessarily apply to very early in the morning per se, but definitely applies from my point of view because indeed the entire point is to do the news and to get it right. I want to thank all of you for joining me wherever you are under the sound of this voice, the voice so subversive that the US government had to take me off air, wherever you are. Thank you for being here, whatever you're doing. If you dig this content and you find yourself coming back to the show often, please consider giving a like. Again, I know that's presumptive, but we have a damn good show for you today. So I'm going to say it. That's called confidence. If you really dig this content, give it a like, share, support this show through PayPal. I'm sorry. Yeah, share and support the show. If you really dig the content, you can support the show through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chat. All stickers will be read. All stickers will be regarded, providing they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. And I appreciate you for all of it. It really does help make the show what the show is. Like I said, I have a damn good show for you today. Scott Ritter is going to be on the show. We're going to have this conversation about the latest in Ukraine and, for that matter, the latest in Syria. We also have John Kiriakou joining us. The reason why I asked John to join the show is because there is this, there's been this constant effort going all the way back to the George Bush administration and before to undercut, undermine, and if possible, to overthrow the Syrian government. This is not necessarily being done because of Syria in and of itself. It's primarily being done because Syria is a gateway into Iran, and Iran is a gateway on some level to Russia, meaning it undermines two enemies that the United States, or two countries that the United States has defined as their enemies. There's a reason why Russia and Iran got involved at the point where that conflict kicked off on their border. I played the video for you a few times of Wesley Clark pointing out that he was told that the US government was trying to go through, 7 governments in 5 years, basically reshaping the Middle East with Western power, Western weapons. And if you look at it, in one administration after the next, they have continuously kept to that script, meaning regardless of whether you had a Democrat in office or Republican in office, back to Democrat in office, they have stuck with that same script assiduously. I'm sorry, it didn't sound right in my head. They have assiduously kept to the same script. And in doing so, created a swath of chaos and rivers of blood all throughout the Middle East. And on some level, people ask, what was it for? Certainly, it wasn't for humanitarian reasons. It's not like the bombs hit people and turned into flowers. It's not that. And certainly, it wasn't for those particular states. No, it was done to maintain power, Western hegemonic power, led by the United States. The reason why I keep hitting this point is because I'm trying to get people to realize that regardless of what they are saying in an overt sense, Ukraine is about Ukraine. Taiwan is about sovereignty. Syria is about citizens who have grievances with their governments. So they chop off heads paid for by Turkey and the United States, and for that matter, even Israel. Like, there is the narrative that comes along with it that acts as if these things are individual, that these things are isolated, that it's not necessarily something that's taken in a global context. So you would see the Georgia protests, and you would say, this seems to be protests in Georgia. Or you would see a battalion of jihadists, head choppers, rummaging into Syria out of the blue. It's like, I guess there are more protests in Syria. At least that's the way it's going to be reported on some level. And then you see Israel killing indiscriminately, and the newspaper would say, in very passive language, Palestinians died. Israel attacked. was like, whoa, so Israel got attacked, but the Palestinians just died. It wasn't from the genocide, the indiscriminate killing. It's the way they report it. And they report it as if they're all separate and distinct, isolated incidents. And I guess my point is, they're not. The same people are funding all of it. And they're funding all of it for very specific reasons having to do with maintaining hegemonic control of the globe. Each conflict, if you look at it, whether it's Georgia, and if you remember, there was this big deal over the FAIR law in Georgia, the same FAIR law that we have in the United States, that the US criticized, complained about it vociferously. You got Europe complaining about it vociferously. And then so you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. Why are Europe and America bothered by a law that is trying to figure out and to make sure that foreign money doesn't come and alter our elections or our politics, just like America has the law so it won't alter elections and the politics, meaning we want to know if foreign actors are putting money into the country. Why would you complain about that unless you wanted to put foreign money into the country, which is what it was. They wanted to have influence without necessarily having the clarity of the government to know that they were being influenced, because we have been against the Dream Party because you're skeptics. My point is, Europe and America are doing in Georgia what they were doing in Ukraine, even to the point of handing out baked goods, as Victoria Nuland famously handed out cookies where they're handing out like cakes or something in Georgia. The government itself said this would not be, meaning the prime minister, the democratically elected prime minister, this will not be another Maidan 2.0, meaning he fully understands that they are influencing the politics of that country. And by the way, influencing the politics in a way that makes it clear to him that he should be skeptical of Europe, that Europe is not for sovereign states, especially when those sovereign states go against the will of Europe. If you remember, Yanukovych had to deal with this push by the West for NATO, even though it was clear as day that that push was going to break the government. Even though they were clear that push was going to break the government, going all the way back to 2008, William Burns, the current CIA director, that's there right now, for the time being anyway, since his boss got fired, net means net. Ukraine and Georgia aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Moscow, they engender serious concerns about the consequences for stability in the region. Not only does Russia perceive encirclement and efforts to undermine Russia's influence in the region, but it also fears unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences, which would seriously affect Russia's security interests. Experts tell us that Russia is particularly worried about strong divisions in Ukraine over NATO membership, with much of the ethnic Russian community being against membership, could lead to a major split involving violence or, at worst, a civil war. In that eventuality, Russia would have to decide whether to intervene, a decision it does not want to face. So even though William Burns may be telling you today, well, Russia just intervened because, Putin's a madman, he wants to take over all of Europe. In 2008, William Burns predicted everything that is happening now, because Ukraine did start off as a civil war. But that civil war started because the legitimate government of Ukraine fell. And that government, the Coup government, started killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians to the tune of 14,000. I'm saying that even in that document, he understood that Georgia and Ukraine were in the target of NATO, and that this was something Russia wasn't going to tolerate. In this case, you had a government in Georgia that is resisting this coup. Now, Europe and the US are going to turn around and say, these people were completely peaceful. They were loving light. They were carrying lilies as they walked out, and they were being beat by Georgian cops, by the Georgian government of that illegitimate party that took office. That's what they're going to tell you. That's what they're going to say. That's what they're going to scream. They screamed the same thing when Ukraine was going through their Maidan as they were pushing that Maidan using violent Nazis over the government. It's playbook. It's how it's done. Overthrowing of governments, especially when you have Western backing to do so. My point is, that's another front. It's not distinct. It's not separate. When you really get to the bones of it in regards to what they're trying to accomplish, it's another front. These governments are trying to declare some level of sovereignty and independence and want to deal with each other with clean hands, not necessarily with this idea of there being a hegemon directing events in the way that the West has organized the world now. That world order is slipping. They feel it slipping. They feel the rest of the world wanting to move into multipolarity. And I would imagine they even understand that their argument for why it should be a hegemonic world is ludicrous. How do you look another man in the face and say, we are superior? We are better. We're indispensable. So, we can set the rules in the way that we want the rules because it's a rules-based order. We change the rules when we want to. How do you really make that argument to somebody and expect them to accept that argument as legitimate? Why would they see themselves as lesser than, or for that matter, why would they want their country to be under the thumb of a hegemonic West? I have no idea why they think that. But that's the rub. They don't really care. Their thought is, we need to maintain control. It's not about people having buy-in. We need to maintain control by hook or by crook, however we need to do it. And in this case, proxies around the globe is the way to which this war is being waged and this war is being opposed. In China, Russia, Iran's case, in some cases, you can say Hezbollah, Hamas, those are proxies, okay, fair enough. But the reality of it is, it's the multipolarity that is the main push. It is the multipolarity that is the strategic win. And you get the economic aspect of that with them using their own currency so they can basically minimize the use of the dollar, allowing or disallowing the West to influence their politics in an economic sense. I'm pointing out that it is a global war, and that global war is taking place now. It's just so happened that wars are fought differently using proxies as opposed to having direct exchanges, because those direct exchanges mean the end of the world. If a country is losing, that country may resort to nuclear weapons if they have them at their disposal. And because you don't necessarily want to face that question, what you do is you pay this terrorist, you pay this opposition group, you give money and support to any group that wants to declare some level of independence, and you claim, well, we believe in democracy. And you would send out your NGOs like the National Endowment for Democracy or NSAID. All of these groups are fronts for the CIA. And even though they call it National Endowment for Democracy, what they're talking about is stuff like in Georgia, where one party loses, and instead of this liberal party that's supposed to believe in democracy taking their ball and go home, you get the president, Zorbas Vili, deciding, I'm not going anywhere. I don't believe that the election was legitimate. She goes further. She says, I think the Russians intruded in the election, even though I have no evidence of it at all. I just feel it. And so, that's what I'm running with. This is what these guys are calling democracy. When you lose, you don't take your ball and go home. You stay, you complain, and you hold on tight with this belief that your Western backers in other countries will intervene into the affairs in order to push it over the ledge. Same thing in Syria, where you have the US that has just gotten its ass kicked in Ukraine, switching over to Syria to expand the battlefield in a sense, backed by Turkey, who wants territory in Syria, backed by Israel, that wants to undercut, to decapitate the ability for Hezbollah to get arms in from Syria, as Syria is one of the gateways to which they get those armaments to resist occupation by Israel. They're connected, at least from my point of view. It may not necessarily be hot in a major power sense, but I would even argue that's not really true anymore. Because regardless of all its attempt to contain this stuff, the proxies in Russia right now, you have US missiles fired by US forces. Even though they may say, Ukraine is holding the gun, okay, fair enough. The US is firing that gun. The US is giving targeting intelligence in that gun. Our hands are all over it into Russia proper, not disputed territory, into Russia proper. I am pointing out that that is a red line, and that is something that hadn't happened. Yes, Belgorod, fair enough, but all things being equal, in an acknowledged, understood way that this is what they're doing. This was not previously acknowledged. The fact that they're making it known now is a clear escalation, especially since Russia has said this was a red line. It's outrageous. They can't accept that they're losing their place in the world. And so they're willing to bring the world to an end, or at the very least to the brink of the end.